Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
This week, I'm really excited to be talking to Josh Frith, who is the founder and bootstrapper behind the Dubs, a financial services marketing agency. Josh has been bootstrapping the Dubs for almost 30 years now, with offices initially in Sydney and now also in Singapore and London. And I'm excited to have him on the show because the business has gone through a number of significant transformations, and Josh has a different approach than some people to headcount and cost, which I think is absolutely fascinating, and we're going to be digging into that. So welcome, Josh. Thanks very much for coming onto the show, and look forward to chatting.
Oh, look, Charles, an absolute pleasure. I'm really pleased that you've invited me on. So yeah, look, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Cool. Well, let's go back in time if we can to 1996, which is some time ago. I suspect there are some people listening to this who weren't even born then. But let's go back to 1996 when the web was really still. I remember my first business. People regarded it as a fad. People didn't think it was going to go anywhere. No one thought there'd be online magazines or online publications. So at that point, 1st of January 96, you decided to set up a business. Like, how did you start and go about things, and what were you sort of focused on initially?
Well, look, I mean, even stepping back as to why I would have even done it in the first instance. Look, prior to 96, I was happily working as a journalist at News Corp. It was an amazing gig and I loved it. I would turn up to work every day. I would meet interesting people and all I had to do was write about it. And that was a job, I got paid for that. I just couldn't believe it. But I went and visited my brother in San Francisco, and he was running a special effects studio at the time. And he actually took me he goes, come meet these guys who've just started this magazine. Anyway, we walked down the road and we met them, and it was actually the guys who'd started Wired magazine, right? Which became a global behemoth. And they gave me my introduction to the World Wide Web, or the information superhighway, as it was called back then. And it was rubbish, right? When you looked at it, it was just literally, big old chunky screen as it was back then, the box, with a grey screen, black text, a couple of purple links, an image that would just bang on anywhere, and a fuzzy logo. That was the World Wide Web. There wasn't even a browser to look at. Anyway, on the plane back to Sydney, I had a long time to kind of just think, as you do when you're trapped on a plane for 24 hours. And I thought, look, there's something to this. There's something about the communication of it, right? So by the time I'd landed, I decided I was going to quit my job. And that was a fairly big thing to do at the time. And I rang my brother and I said, look, I've quit. Will you start a business with me? So we had a lot of enthusiasm. We had no idea what we were doing, and no one else did either. So imagine that in 96, when you're actually talking to people about the internet and they've never even heard the word, and you're trying to explain to them how you could get something online. Also at the time, no one could get online. Right, to get online, you actually had to plug into a phone jack,
Dial-up,
and then experience the full bandwidth joy of 14.4 kilobits of data drizzling into your computer at unbelievable speeds. So anyway, we did that, and we learned a lot. So there were no tools available at the time. Everything was hand coded, right? So there were no CMSs to make websites. There was no email marketing tools. There was nothing. It was day zero. But that was probably the most exhilarating part about it. There was no boundary on anything at that point in time. So I guess the thing that we had to then do was think about, well, how do we promote ourselves, right? We didn't have any money, right? So even back then, what we decided that we could at least anchor on was what we were doing, and turn ourselves effectively into content, right? So that's where we kind of started way back then in terms of how we'd think about how we would market ourselves. We would turn the machinations of what the business was doing and what it was thinking about into content that we would put back out into the industry. That ethos has changed kind of in various guises, but the basis of it hasn't changed. So when I'm looking now at kind of companies that are starting up, right, that are at day one, that are literally at the bootstrap day one, that would be a word of advice I would provide through. They're putting all their effort into how do I create my product? How do I create my service? And absolutely, you should do that. But at the same time, when you haven't got a market, when you haven't got a budget for marketing, how can you do marketing without budget? And that can be turning what you are doing into the content itself and then distributing that organically. And that's the starting point.
Yes, I mean, obviously, 30 years, there's been a huge amount of development in technology and changes that you've kind of navigated through. But you've kind of transformed and metamorphosed what the business does, like fundamentally a number of times. So just tell us a bit more about that. I want to dig into that a bit.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And this is almost like an inbuilt kind of belief, right, apart from anything else. And it's just come from what I've noticed was being there for so long. Something becomes very popular. You make hay while the sun is shining, but when you turn around after a period of time, you find that everyone else is in there. It's a really crowded space, and everyone's doing it. So when that happens, that becomes the juncture that I decided it's time to get out, turn around, and go in exactly the opposite direction. So it's a very contrarian thing to do when nothing is going wrong. You're actually at the top of your game, and everything on the face of it looks fantastic. So we've actually, in 30 years, our business, when we say 30 years, it's been 5 distinct businesses within that time. So we started out as a web design agency for 5 years. We then morphed into an online advertising agency when that became the absolute thing that everyone was into. When that started to commoditize, we then switched to business to become a social media agency. It's easy to say, just do that, but it's really difficult to actually change the culture of your business and tear everything down and then completely drag yourself over the coals and reinvent it as something else. We think that only we should have the privilege of destroying our business rather than the market destroying our business.
Okay.
So at least that way, when we do it to ourselves, we have the opportunity to rebirth it in the vision that we see it should be to keep on going. And look, I don't know if it's dumb luck or whatever else, but when I look around, I don't have one single competitor that stayed there from day one that is here now. Right? So in terms of just staying power, I don't know if we just duck and weave well, but it's been a process that's developed for us. And I think that while many people may not want to be quite so brutal as doing that to their business, I think that you can never be complacent. Even when you've kind of found your niche and you've locked onto that and you think you have it completely covered, it's only a matter of time. You only have it for a certain period of time.
It's really interesting.
Always change.
When you say that, because I mean, particularly with digital and AI and and everything that's happening now, but it's so often when you're looking at, I remember doing this a number of times with RFI, you're looking at a new opportunity or a new market, and you find someone that is doing exactly that. They're sitting in their niche. They've got a very nice little business or big business. They're kind of at the top of their game, but they've kind of lost that paranoia, which I think is so healthy when you're running a business. Being paranoid stops you being complacent, and that effectively means that they're generally ripe for disruption because their service might have slipped, their processes might have got a bit tired. They haven't it's kind of looking at, and you can do this so often now with particularly with all the power of digital and AI. Just look around at something that was working really well a couple of years ago, and now it's just dropped the ball slightly, and away you go.
Well, they don't see you coming, right? Because they're only looking around in their own environment. Right? They're not expecting or thinking that someone can take them, right? And that's when you're at your most vulnerable. So exactly as you say. I mean, I think a common trait that I find talking to every founder I've ever spoken to is that element of paranoia.
Yeah.
right? Um,
It's healthy
but
and it's necessary.
it is necessary, but it's also where creativity comes from as well, because you're always looking to evolve something. You're never satisfied that what you've got is perfect. That you're always worried that someone is just on your heels, and it's a healthy thing to have because they are actually just on your heels.
Yeah, no, there's so many new propositions coming out now that are smarter, faster, better. And if you're not paranoid, then you very quickly become complacent, and that's followed pretty quickly by irrelevance. I want to talk about headcount in a moment, but just before we talk about that, just talk about culture. So, I mean, effectively, you've radically transformed your business every 6 years, and and you've done that 5 times. So, when you do that and you kind of burn it all down in order to build it back up. How does that work culturally? Are you swapping in are you going, okay, well, we did do this and we were a web design agency and these are the people that were great at that, but now we're transforming, so we need to move them on and bring in a new team, or do you keep the same team? How does it work from a kind of cultural point of view?
Yeah, look, it's difficult, right? You're telling people who have trained in a certain thing have become expert at it, right? That we're going to stop the focus on that and learn something new. You have to go back to being a novice, a noob.
Yeah.
Right? That takes people right out of their comfort zone, and you're not just doing it in a little area of your business. You're doing it right across the entire thing. You're taking everyone back to day one. Okay, so you need to be really quite articulate in your reasoning as to why you think we should do that, and also have a bit of a straw man as to how people are going to go along with that, right? Because there's nothing surer. It's not a smooth process. You are dragging yourself over gravel in the beginning, and there's a lot of doubt, and there's actually a lot of tears and angst that goes along with it, right? But as you start to actually get through that, you start to build that experience. It's with the existing team. It's also an opportunity then to bring on new members with that experience as well. So you find you haven't lost the experience of what you've had before. You've still got that, right? So we don't lose that capability. But what we've got is now a business that has a completely new capability. It's far more in demand by the market, but we have the depth of what we used to do before. So it's a way of kind of reframing where you point the business, but expanding the capability of the business. And after you've done that, the first time it's kind of terrifying because you're betting the farm, and
Yeah.
and no one likes that risk, and certainly not myself. I mean, while I do these things and that sort of stuff, I am completely risk averse. I mean, the only way I could think about myself, we put it into this stupid analogy, is if you were like a professional rock climber and you were terrified of heights. That's me when it comes to business risk like that. But something in you says, look, we know it's the right thing to do. It'll be terrifying, but trusting in yourself that you'll learn from the jarring bits that you encounter. You'll dust yourself off, and you'll keep on going. And I think I'm going to butcher this. There's a Japanese Zen saying, I'm sure someone's going to say this is not what it is, mate. It's stand up 8, right? And what it means is take the 7 hits, because on the 8th, if you persist and you stand up, you're the ones left standing, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of the mindset that we apply to this.
Well, it's a brilliant analogy as well, because I know as a fact that lots of professional rock climbers got into it in order to get over their fear of heights. It's one of the most common reasons why people become professional mountain climbers and rock climbers. So it's a great analogy. But just coming back to that, so you're bootstrapping. Whenever you're bootstrapping, you generally, every single dollar counts. You're never flush with funds. How do you what are you looking for when you're hiring people? Because you're assuming hiring people that are very, very open to an absolutely vertical learning curve, being highly adaptable, not people who like being in their comfort zone. So kind of how do you find that?
Okay. What am I looking for? I'm looking for enthusiasm in the first instance, right? I'm not looking for, as the first thing, it's not off the table. I'm not looking for experience or expertise. necessarily, even in the particular area that we're looking to hire, right? Because sometimes that can bring baggage as to how things should be done.
Absolutely.
That are rusted on. So we're looking for enthusiasm and open minds. That's to me are the two most valuable aspects, because people can learn anything, right? You know, the human mind is an amazing thing. Everyone can be trained, and if you have people that have open and inquiring minds, they can turn themselves to anything, right? If they're given the opportunity and they're not locked in a pigeonhole, which is definitely not what we're trying to do. So they're the two attributes that we're definitely trying to find when we're looking for people. And we have found people completely outside of our industry. You know, the guy who is you know, the general manager of our UK operation, runs an amazing business, incredible guy. You know, he used to be like an animatronics set designer. Anyway, for the Australians who watch this, there's an ad called goes back many years in Australia, called the Gobbledoc. It was a furry creature that ate crisps and stuff. And what else? Barnaby made that. He was then on the set of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and all this sort of stuff. Not necessarily the guy you would think would be involved in this industry, but when I was talking to him, it was the open inquiring mind that I lucked onto, and it was a great decision to do. So it just kind of gives you an example of that sort of stuff.
No, it's fantastic, and it's so true. Like, people with experience. I mean, the business we built was fundamentally a market research agency, although we approached it very differently, and we learned the hard way that we just couldn't employ anyone who'd worked for 10 or 15 years in market research, because the first thing they started doing was going like, no, you can't do it like that. You need to do it like this, and kind of like taking us back 20 years and thinking it's like, no, you know, time has moved on. You don't need to do that. Just coming back to, you know, the team though, and headcount, and you know, this is fascinating. I know you've had a mantra for the last 30 years of constantly trying to reduce the headcount as much as possible all the time. So just tell us a bit about where that came from, and the story behind that, and the philosophy around.
Look, it's not about being ruthless, right? It's more. It's to do with ideas of scale, right? So body shops are very hard to scale. But the other thing is, what I noticed is the bigger our company became by headcount, the more the slower we could move. And so what really showed that to me is some guys I knew had just started up a little fintech, right? And they were bootstrapping, and they didn't have a home, right? So we just put them in our office space, and we had a great big open plan office space. And I was way at the back of the room, and I would just watch them every day. And every morning they would come in and they'd go into this little huddle, and they'd all talk to each other and stand up and do that, and posting notes everywhere and all this sort of stuff, go back, feverishly working away. And then I'd talk to them, and literally by the end of the day, they had completely re-geared certain aspects of their business, got it live, had it in market, and were then testing it. And I was like, you know what? I looked at our business and I said, that's the mindset we used to have. But what we've become now is what we swore we would tear down. We had become this large, bureaucratic, slow, rusted on business. So I made the decision at that point in time that I was just going to tear the walls down. Right? And I meant that metaphorically and literally. So we got rid of our office. We got rid of the idea of an office, and this was way before COVID. Right? Yeah. So we were going to distribute ourselves, and we did. We decided that the thing that was core about our business was intelligence, right, and experience. So we'll keep a hold of that, because that's what our business anchors around. It wasn't about production and commodified aspects. And also in terms of our team, you know, it was big for what we were doing, but we didn't have enough people that we could be the best at everything, and that drove me mad. Right? To be, we weren't chasing money. We were chasing the pride of being the best at what you do. Yeah. Right? As a practitioner wanting to be best at that. So we then just built a network external network of all of the production elements that we would need, that we used to have in-house, so that we would find the best copywriters, the best designers, the best coders, the best whatever, wherever they may be in the world, right? And we would partner with them on projects. And it did a few things. And the other thing we did was we got rid of any fixed contract that we had, right? Nothing, right? So it did a radical overhaul of how the business worked. And it did a radical overhaul of how the business performed, right? So from a financial perspective, it actually put like a profit fire under the business. So we saw a profitability that we had never been able to achieve before by turning to that model as well. Wow. Right? So there were fundamental reasons for doing it at an operational thing and just an ethos, but there were also financial benefits that came out of it as well. And at the time, that we did that. If we did that now, everyone would go, yeah, of course. But at the time that we did that, no one was doing it that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating what you say about being the best in the world, because if your goal is to be the best in the world, then you can kind of hang out everything else off that, because aiming to be mediocre just seems to be a kind of pointless reason to get out of bed in the morning. And if you can be the best in the world at the very, very specific niche thing that you do, then the revenue will come, but it will also bring a huge amount of pride and excellence and creative thinking to you and your team. So just coming back to obviously you started in Australia. You've got offices now in Singapore and London. I'm almost hesitant to ask you, what did you do that was out of the box, given so much that you've done that was disruptive and out of the box? But when you were scaling globally, what was some of and you were opening up in Singapore and London, what were some of the considerations and things? And was there anything particularly innovative or out of the box that you did in order to get those? Because having had a business based in Sydney, like you, with offices in Singapore, and it's not a friendly time zone or travel loop to be working with. So and it can get very, very. There can be the point, if you're not careful of it, there is no downtime, because you're in that 24-hour cycle, particularly this time of the year. So what were some of the challenges, and what was some of the thinking you did to get those offices up and running?
Oh, even to do it in the first instance was completely crazy in terms of the timing, right? So the time that we decided to open the London office, there was one of the main .com busts that was happening at the time, right? There's been a number of them over the years. It also coincided at a time that there was a huge economic drop in the financial markets, and in particular the capital markets. Now, we as a business, our company at the time, before we rebranded as Adults, was called @WWW, which was a disaster of a name to have, right? Try and say that after 3 beers in, it's impossible. So there was the whole kind of web aspect of that. And the product that we had at the time was called IPOSoft, because we had created a product to digitize the capital raising process for IPOs. So we were about most unwelcome group in the world, where we were anchored on digital and capital markets, both of which had completely tanked in the world. And we went, well, if we're going to go out backwards, where we were much younger guys back then, we were Aussies, got a bit of wanderlust. We want to at least have some time with our boots on the ground in London, as Australians do quite often. So we opened up in London at that point in time. The other thing that was against us was that the Australian dollar was just worth nothing. It was the Aussie peso, right? So we had very little money. We were losing money because of what was happening economically. We decided to open up on the other side of the world, where everything was 3 times more expensive than back home. It was a crazy thing to do, but I'll tell you what, there is nothing quite like terror and fear to get you running fast. I mean, like really fast. When you are totally on, you have a very short ripcord. You've got to make it happen. And look, maybe it was just dumb luck or whatever else, but we scored great contracts right from the get-go, and we've never looked back since. Okay, and we've established the London office now very well. Interestingly, opening other offices, becomes kind of harder after you've done that. People think, oh, well, it must be easier to open more offices. It's not, right? I don't know how you found the process, but everything takes, for me, takes longer than you think to sink it in. It costs a lot more, and there's a lot more hurdles. And I remember asking like a guy who worked in private equity, he does a lot of the valuations of massive media companies and that sort of thing. And I asked his advice on that. And he said, well, whatever your idea is, he said, he goes, halve whatever you think it's going to make, double whatever you think it's going to cost, double the time you think it's going to take. And then he said, and then double all of that again, and it will kind of be what actually happens. And I said, oh, what for little startups and whatever else? He goes, no, it doesn't matter about the size. It's just the amount of money you'll lose in the beginning. But that's kind of the rule. And he goes, you can wrap as much business plan as you like around it. That'll be kind of what happens. And you have to have persistence.
Yeah, persistence is key. And it's interesting. I always tell people when they're starting, when they're thinking about starting a business, okay, exactly that. Double the costs, halve the revenue, triple the timeline. And then when you've got all of that, pretty much double that, and that will give you a good sense of what you need to survive. It's funny what you say about London. I went from Sydney in 2009, in the middle of the financial crisis, back to London to see family and friends, and through a lot of weird circumstances, decided to launch a mortgage product in the London financial services market in March 2009. Probably the worst month in the last 100 years. I used to joke, and I got back to Sydney and spoke to my business partner, and I was like, by the way, I've opened, started in London. He was like, you've done what? And terror and fear are huge drivers. And we ended up opening up in Singapore because I just had to stop somewhere in between London and Sydney and get off the plane and have a break. And I thought, well, while I'm here, I might as well have some meetings. So
that was the same reason we did it. Yep.
lots of different drivers there. But just coming on to sort of marketing, and which is obviously a thing you specialize in. So one of the things we talk about a lot with founders is, okay, you've got to have certain skill sets. You can't, when you start, and I want to talk about, when we're going to see the first $1 billion single founder business in a second. But if you're starting a business, you're founding a business, you're bootstrapping, you're low on funds, and you don't know anything about marketing, and it's so crowded now, getting your brand out there with traditional media, with social media, like getting making yourself heard. What are some of the things that you should be thinking about, or you can what are some of the kind of 101s? These are the things you need to think about from a digital marketing point of view, from a brand point of view, when you're first starting, if you don't really know that much about it.
The first thing I'd say is don't try and build your brand like everyone else. Everyone can sit there and can over research everything, right? And think, oh, they're the best. We'll be a bit like that, a bit like that, a bit like that, a bit like that, a bit like that. The brands that get, to me, remembered, and it doesn't matter whatever category you're talking about, are the ones that are just quite simply the most distinctive. Right? If you think about in terms of advertising and marketing, if you then run the research groups and actually show that ad, that content, that whatever to a group of people and ask them to recall, and they say, yeah, I can recall that, I remember that, and then ask them to tell you what brand, right? More than 50% of the time, they'll get that wrong. What they'll generally recall is the most distinctive brand in that category, right? So you mightn't even be great at actually marketing your message, but if you can be the most distinctive at how you present yourselves, right, you can piggyback on the smarts of all the other marketers in your category, really just educating your particular audience that you want to talk to about that thing, but they don't recall them because they're not distinctive. They recall you and they come to you and they think that. Right? So that's the first thing. The second aspect is not to fear being a fraud. Right? Everyone, the biggest thing I see is people don't start because they don't think it's going to be perfect. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, right? You're bootstrapping. It's going to be like rubbish on day one. Let's be honest. Okay. do not give that. That's not a reason not to do it, right? You have to fake it till you make it. Right?
Yeah.
So someone said to me one time, I guess they were being facetious, I said, oh, they were a rock climber. I said, oh, how do you climb Everest? And they said, well, to be honest, the first thing you do is you just start walking towards it. And he goes, we walk towards it, you're going to get it. You're going to hit it at one point. And I was like, oh, yeah, joking. He goes, no, I'm serious. He goes, I'm meaning it metaphorically, but I'm serious. Just put your feet forward on no matter what you're doing. Right. So from a marketing point of view, just get in market. Right. You don't have the budget to burn the others away. So what do you have? What about you is distinctive? What about you can you actually deliver and in what channels? Right. So everyone's got access to digital. Right. Everyone's got access to social. So they're going to be your home base. What are you going to have on your website? What are you going to have that you're going to be putting out through your social channels? How can you do that? The other thing that I'd say to you is, which we didn't have, and which has now become obviously, just the word on everyone, is AI. Right. Yeah. So AI is going to very much level the field. As I think you were mentioning before, the first company that's bootstrapping itself at the moment is going to be a unicorn, $1 billion unicorn with employee of one, and the rest is AI. That's on the cards. So a lot of the smarts in terms of marketing these days are increasingly being built into AI. Right? So experiment with that to underpin what you're doing and learn. Read a lot, watch a lot, absorb a lot. You're a founder, so you never switch off anyway. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Founders that are bootstrapping, their business is how they actually fundamentally identify themselves. It's with them wherever they go. It's even with you on the loo. Like your head doesn't stop. Right. So it's that curiosity. So use it. Watch, listen, learn, experiment, bolt things in. As long as you are you don't stop, you will learn, and you'll find that 12 months, 18 months down the track, you're going to be really good. Right? That is what I'd say.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because the kind of VC world is now, I think the amount of funds sloshing around globally in the venture capital world, like it's over $1 trillion. It's the biggest it's ever been. And coincidentally, just as the amount of funds grows this enormous size, the reasons that you need funding are rapidly diminishing, because the reasons you need funding are to employ people. As you say, lots of roles now. I don't think we're far off from someone coming up with an idea as getting to $1 billion and maybe not even a single employee. Just like you've got an AI based CEO, you've got an AI based business, you've just got the founder in the background making some strategic and creative decisions occasionally. But at the other end of the market, when you are starting a business now, then there are so many tools. There's so much different, and there's also so many different forms of financing through fintechs that just 25, 30 years ago just really weren't available. Just want to come back to sort of the culture and getting going, and that sort of that self-education, so that you know what you don't know, particularly when you're starting. So kind of going right back, obviously you had a journalist background, you're News Corp, and you decided to start the business. The first thing you have to do when you're bootstrapping is get some food on the table, which involves going out and selling what you have. So to people who've never done that before, and I would argue that even if you've got traditional sales experience where you've got a brand and a product, and that's a very, very different thing to going out with no brand, no real idea of what the product is. As you say, what you do have is pretty rubbish first time at best, because you're bootstrapping. How do you make that leap, other than just jumping off the cliff? What are some of the things that can help you make that leap and say, okay, I'm going to go and talk to someone, I'm going to say, here's this, will you give me some money?
Well, look, first up, you've just got to have the blind faith, right? That just has to be there, and I don't know how else to put that, right?
Passion and self-belief, I think, are the other ways of phrasing it. But yeah, you have to believe in it, because if you don't believe in it, nobody else is going to.
Hey, look, where fools rush in. Look, there's that, okay? And I think that you'll find you've got to accept rejection, right? you're going to be rejected so many times. But each of those rejections are actually the building blocks of the yes you're going to hear. You have to go through them. And I remember having that with people involved with our business, and I was getting kind of upset that they weren't on board with what I'm talking about. And they said, hey, I am the friendliest audience you could possibly have. So if you can't convince me of this, how on earth do you think we're going to succeed out there? And they were right. I needed to actually hear all of those objections, look inwardly as to what's behind that, and just reframe, like rethink through the issue, right? And keep on twisting that Rubik's cube until you get it right. You need to have all of those rejections before you're going to arrive at the right answer, right? So doesn't feel good, feels awful, right? Never feels good, but ultimately it's important.
Yeah, we used to have the rule, myself and my co-founder, that okay, if one of us has an idea and we can't even convince our co-founder of the merits of the idea, like who is literally the friendliest, most the audience that most wants this to work. If I can't convince Al and Al couldn't convince me, we needed to go back to the drawing board because it probably wasn't a good idea. But it just kind of brings me on to the idea of co-founders and persistence and determination and the mental toll. So obviously bootstrapping, as you say, you live it, you breathe it, like it doesn't ever turn off, particularly when you start operating internationally, but it doesn't really turn off anywhere. It's it's not always 2 o'clock in the morning, spreadsheets in your head as you're trying to sleep, but it's ever present. So how do you maintain that persistence and determination without the negative, the flip side of where you get into mental exhaustion and mental stress that's difficult and challenging to cope with? I mean, over the years, I'm sure you've had moments where you've got that kind of existential staring into the abyss kind of thing, and it's like, okay, I had it a number of times. I might have overreached here and I could have just blown the whole thing up. And you always say to yourself, if I survive this, I swear I won't do it again. And then invariably you do 4 or 5 years later. But what are some of the things that you can kind of do to kind of help cope with that, other than just be aware it's going to happen?
Okay, look, the first thing I'd say is never actually lose the mentality of bootstrapping, right? Don't ever think about this bootstrapping approach is going to be something that I just have to get through and then it will be completely different, right? You want to have that mentality because it's how you'll build a great business. It's how you'll keep it an amazing business. And then ultimately it's how you'll make it an exceptionally profitable business, right? Because you won't accept wastage either, right? It's in your mindset. You're really, you're built frugally, right? And it's a good thing to keep, right? Because you need to husband your resource. You are right. The problem with founders are they keep on taking on and on and on and on, and they grind themselves into the ground. And the mental toll of that is quite astonishing. And it's astonishing on yourself and also, unfortunately, on those closest around you as well.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have any kind of panacea on how to avoid that because everyone does it.
Yeah.
Right? You just have to find at a certain point, you say, it just simply can't continue this way, right? It'll be a really good juncture because it's probably the point at which you then truly learn how to delegate properly, right? Because I don't know about you, but I found that as our business grew, I kept my fingers in all the pies. I thought I could be involved in everything and that I was necessary for everything, right? Was the other thing. So the pressure just builds on and on and on and on and on, right? And then the rest of your life suffers. So at a certain point, you just say, well, if this is truly, if I am right this way, then the business doesn't deserve to keep on going. So I need to relinquish some of the reins. And that's what I did, right? So learn how to delegate properly. And once you hand over ownership of something, accept that they are going to make mistakes and learn and whatever else. And that's all part of the process. And that's actually part of the strength of the business. When you get to that point, I don't know if you'll ever find a completely kind of happy equilibrium, but you find something that you can actually that you can sustain and be far happier with in yourself. You've always got that tweakiness though. Right? It's
Yeah, I
always
think one of the best pieces of advice I got about, kind of leadership is, one of the things as a leader you do when you're leading your business is coaching the next group of leaders who are working with you, who are part of the team. Because if you're not doing that, then A, you're not bringing them on and they're not developing, and B, you're going to get stuck. And I mean, these are very kind of like off the top of my head numbers, but there's the number of businesses I've come across over the years, which are sort of 10 to 12 people, probably 4 to 5 million in revenue. And they've just been that way for ages because there is nothing that the CEO and founder is not instrumental in. And if that person gets hit by a bus, everything pops up. But yeah, so I just want to, we've gone through, transformation, we've gone through reinvention, like, all sorts of things. If you're starting a business now, just to kind of finish up, so anyone listening out there who's on the fence, they're hearing all the good things, the fun, the excitement, the craziness, the energy it brings, the enthusiasm it brings. They're also hearing, like, the persistence, the determination, the grit, the toll, the sometimes it feels like the world is throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at you, and you're just trying to like show, as I think Winston Churchill said, when in hell, keep going. And you kind of have that mentality sometimes. But yeah, what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about, okay, is this a good thing to do? Is this, what would you say to them if they were sort of going, okay, give me one thing to focus on?
Okay. You need to do it if it feels like it's something you just have to do, right? And that the chances of it succeeding are very slim. But even in the face of that, you decide you're going to do it, right? That's at least the right mentality to come into it.
Yeah.
I would say the greatest thing I'd say is just never give up, right? You're going to have so many tribulations along the way, right? And some of them are going to feel like absolute showstoppers for you. But if you just keep your feet moving, you will get through, right? There's always that. And if you have that self-belief, I think you can get there. And the reason I'd say that is because once you do get through, there is also nothing quite like that personal feeling that you get of just, it's not about even to anyone else. It's completely personal. It's an amazing feeling of achievement and satisfaction. And it's completely internal. Right, but it's the fuel that keeps everything burning, right?
Yeah.
So I would just say, never be satisfied with whatever anyone else is doing, or even yourself. Always have an amazing element of curiosity, self-belief, and just don't give up. Just don't give up, because you can keep on going even when it feels bad.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that advice, and thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been really, really interesting, and hugely insightful, and lots of really, really great practical advice for anyone out there that's bootstrapping or thinking of bootstrapping a business. So Josh Frith, thank you very much for your time. To any of our listeners that have got any questions for Josh, please get in contact either via LinkedIn or via the website, or just DM. And yeah, it was fascinating as always, and look forward to speaking again soon. Thank you.
Giles, a pleasure as always.
For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.